for years, the calendar was prepared by Father Sergei Kargai. This was a long, long time ago. And then he passed it on to Yuri Leodorovich Shurlovsky, who was the chairman, the president of the FFA for many years. And I began working on it with him pretty much when he started working on it. So I've probably been working on the calendar now since the early 90s, maybe. And we used to have a ritual. So he would scope it out kind of initially, and then I would take over and I would make sure all the dates were in the right places and the fasts were in the right places, and that's a whole special thing we can talk about. And obviously the calendar changes year to year because Pascha moves around, and that has significant impact on the first part of the first half of the year. And I would send him a draft, and he would put it into the computer, and he had a whole little setup in the basement of his house. And then I would go to his house a couple of times, and his wife, Sofia Konstantinovna, would make soup and tea, and we'd have soup and tea, and we'd do the calendar together. And then when he fell ill, and eventually he died, it went over to Father Evgeny Kolovor. And he and I have been working on it now together. Well, first it went to Yura Pazevsky, and then it went to Father Evgeny. And Father Evgeny and I have been working on it now probably for the last 4 or 5 years. So, yeah, I've been involved in the calendar for probably 25 years by now, probably doing it every year. And it's actually a wonderful thing. First of all, I think it's useful for people. I think it helps. I think it gives a clear picture of the feasts and the kind of the pace of the year, and from a church calendar, from a church perspective, and it helps people, plan their lives around important religious events and commemorations, which is of course important in the Orthodox world. Over the years, become more sensitive to anniversaries as they happen. It used to be more of a, here's some pictures of some Russian schools or some summer camps and things like that, or famous personages. But then we started to do things like this year's calendar is dedicated to the 100th anniversary of the local council, the Great Council of the Russian Church from 1917 to 1918, which was a seminal event in the church. It was the first council in the Russian Church since the 17th century. Then we've had a year dedicated to anniversary years of some significant composers of Russian liturgical music. So we had, last year was, 1,000 years of monasticism on Athos. So significant, but sometimes neglected anniversaries of the Russian Church and Russia in general, and Russian culture and church culture. That's one thing. Another thing is we've become more careful about how we denote fasting days. It used to be there were just no fasts, regular fasts, and strict fasts, which is a very kind of clumsy way to denote fasting in the Russian Church. So many years ago by now, we started to become a little bit more precise in how we indicate the different levels of fasting, whether it's no fast, or a simple fast, which is a regular fast with wine and oil is allowed, then one where wine and oil is not allowed, and the strictest of fasts or fast where fish is allowed. And that's actually the most time-consuming element of the calendar, because especially during what we call the lesser fasts, the Nativity fast in November, December, and the Apostles' fast leading up to the feast day of Peter and Paul, those fasts are dependent on the day of the week and any kind of commemoration that may be coinciding. So during those fast days, a fast on a Tuesday is less strict than a fast on a Wednesday. So it changes every year, and you have to coordinate that, and you have to coordinate when events fall, like the entry of the Theotokos into the temple in December, new calendar. So all of that kind of makes it a kind of a jigsaw puzzle that has to be put together. Generally, the resources that I have at hand are the Canon of the Church, which gives feast days and the order around that, and the fasting rules. But I also coordinate with several people, because I think it's important that our calendar be coordinated with, for sure, other ROCOR endeavors. So I work every year with Father Roman Krasovsky, who is now the head of the mission in Jerusalem, in the Holy Land, and he has been putting together what everyone calls the Jordanville calendar, the Jordanville Typicon. He's been responsible for compiling and editing that for many years already. And I always coordinate with him because it's important, as I say, that we have unity of what we put forth, I think, as far as ROCOR calendars go. And so there's always a question about certain things. When do you celebrate the commemoration of the dead around St. Demetrius' Day in November? That can change a little bit depending on how you approach that day. So I want to make sure that's always together. I want to make sure that we're all commemorating the feast days of the new martyrs together on the same time, and St. John of Shanghai, which are movable feasts. I just want to make sure that that works. And the other person I coordinate with is Daniel Olson, and I always compare and work with him on the fasting days. I spent many years working with Father Gregory Williams, who just died last year and went into schism, unfortunately, about 10 years ago. I used to work with him starting from the 80s, translating the Jordanville calendar into English for our English language parishes. And then that whole endeavor became a lot more sophisticated. Rather than just translating the Jordanville calendar, we began creating an annual Typicon without relying on the Jordanville one. So many things are driven by when Pascha falls, and everything leading up to Pascha, and everything from Pascha up until Trinity Sunday, or even the Sunday of All Saints or the Sunday of Russian Saints after that. And that has an impact on certain events. So, for example, whatever Pascha is, if the Annunciation falls in a certain place within that Paschal period or the Lenten period, that impacts when certain commemorations happen. Certain saints, if their day falls on a commemoration of something during the Lenten period, that saint's commemoration may move. And you have to keep track of all that stuff. You just can't say, oh, this saint's day is always on this day, because it might not always be on that day. Mistakes do creep in. I'm kicking myself 3 years later for a mistake we made in the calendar a couple of years ago, where it was my fault. We had the Dormition of the Theotokos fell on a Friday, and I put a regular fast day instead of a day allowing for fish, which of course you can have fish on a Friday when Dormition falls. And it just was there staring at me all year, that wrong box, and it made me so mad. But there you go. So we do have mistakes, and I apologize to everybody for any mistakes that we have in the calendar. First of all, I enjoy just at the very beginning, when you start putting the dates in their right places. And for me, the work on the calendar starts, typically in May or June of the preceding year. And so I'm already now thinking the whole second half of a given year. I'm already kind of thinking about what's going to happen in the year ahead because I've done the calendar. So I like that. It kind of gives you a snapshot or a look into what's in the future, and it prepares you for that. I also really, really enjoy exploring the anniversaries. And some of the anniversaries come from the FFA and the directors, like the whole idea of the 100th anniversary of the council. I thought that was a great decision. Some of the anniversaries come from Father Roman, who puts some thought into that. And some of the anniversaries, we got to come up with myself and offer it up as a possibility for the board to consider. But I think that's very important because it connects you to things. If you know that this is the 1500th anniversary of the martyrdom of this saint, well, that's important. And I think if you allow people to be attuned to the changes in the calendar from year to year, and how the fast falls and the Pascha falls, and where a specific saint might get a special commemoration because it's some important anniversary, I think that's important because it means that our church is a living thing. It's a church that lives in the present, of course, which is what the calendar does. It shows you what the present is, but it also connects you to a very significant and rich past, and I think that's important. if the calendar is useful in so many countries, should we have versions that are translated into more languages than we have right now? Right now, it's in Russian and English. Is there a need, and would people who speak neither of those languages find use out of the calendar and obtain it every year if it was in their language? Should we have a Russian? I think Russian should always be there, but should we have a Russian French version, a Russian German version, a Russian Spanish version, a Russian, I don't know. That raises the question, and certainly magnifies significantly the complexity of the undertaking, because right now I it's very easy. I speak Russian, I speak English. I can put the calendar together. I'm not so fluent in other languages, and I think we would have to enlist the help of French speakers, German speakers, whatever, and everything would have to get done several months earlier so that that file could be sent to them and their translations could be made. But it's something to consider. I'm glad you asked that question. And I wonder if that's something that people complain about or not. It would be easier in some ways to do it in new orthography because you have a little bit more space because you don't have to put the hard sign and things like that in there. But old orthography to me shouldn't be looked upon as some musty old thing. I think when the orthography changed, it broke written Russian from its roots in an older form of Russian Slavic. But I think it says something about our calendar too, and the history of our calendar and where our calendar comes from. Well, I think a few reasons. I think people for whom it's important use the calendar to kind of plan their life a little bit. And you can look at the calendar and say, okay, this is a good time to take a vacation, or this is not a good time to take a vacation. I think it also helps people remember when names days are. In the calendar, we list the saints' days of, let's call them popular saints, or saints who have a lot of people named after them. And so you can look that up, and you can make a little mark on it, and you have to remember, I have to congratulate Dede Kuala or Tita Masha or whatever, because their saints' day is coming up. I think that's a useful function. But really, I think it also just tells people when important events are happening in the church year, and they know when they should be aware of that and should be in other things. I think if you look at the calendar as it is, and even if you then compare it to the previous year's calendar, you can begin to gain an understanding of things that are important in the church year. And I think that will connect you to the church a little bit more, and to the life of the church and the rhythm of the church. The calendar is a stepping stone into perhaps a deeper understanding of church life.
What are some of the best comments that you've heard about the calendar over the years?
It's interesting. We always get comments from people that are grateful. Or I don't actually see very many of those very much anymore. But Yudita Borovich, we lived very close to each other, and so we would go to the church together and say, I got an email from somebody who thought this was great about the calendar. People also complain. We've had complaints about some of the fast dates not being right or not what people are used to. We had one complaint from somebody asking why we start our calendar with a Sunday rather than a Monday. And because in Russia, I think calendars start with Monday and end on a Sunday. One comment we got, we showed that Nativity is only celebrated on one day, like the Jews celebrate it, which I thought was a very funny comment, because I think, first of all, we don't have it for just one day in red, we have it for 3 days in red, but the Jews don't celebrate Nativity at all. I'd like the calendar to continue to be, a living thing. It's a useful resource for people who want to learn more. And I want to make sure that it continues to do that.